The Great Hall of Axiom Prime was built to impress. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that showed the stars themselves. 47 species had gathered here for centuries to debate, argue, and shape the future of the galaxy. Today, the hall was louder than it had ever been. Ambassador Daniel Carter stood at the human delegation's platform and watched the chaos unfold. He was 58 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes. He had served on this council for 22 years. He had seen arguments before. He had seen anger and accusations. But he had never seen anything like this. The humans caused this crisis, High Chancellor Vexari shouted from the central podium. He was a tall creature with dark blue skin and 4 arms. They waved dramatically as he spoke. They inserted themselves into our trade negotiations. They manipulated the outcome for their own benefit. Daniel did not react. He simply watched. The truth was different, of course. The trade dispute between the Rithian Consortium and the Vel Collective had been heading toward war. Both sides had refused to speak to each other. Daniel had spent 3 months in secret meetings, traveling between their home worlds, slowly building trust. He had found a solution that gave both sides what they needed. The agreement had been signed just 2 weeks ago, but now the Rithians claimed they had been cheated. The Vel said the same. And somehow, both sides blamed humanity. Lieutenant Commander Amy Hughes leaned close to Daniel. She was his military attaché, a sharp woman in her 40s with short brown hair. "Sir, this is insane. We saved them from killing each other." "I know," Daniel said quietly. "Then why aren't you defending us?" Daniel watched Vexari continue his speech. The Tovani leader had always hated humans. He called them newcomers, children who had stumbled into galactic politics by accident. Humanity had only joined the Council 80 years ago. To species that measured their histories in thousands of years, humans were still infants. "Because it won't matter," Daniel said. "Look at them, Amy. They don't want the truth. They want someone to blame." He was right. Around the Great Hall, representatives from dozens of species nodded along with Vexari's words. Some of them knew the truth. Daniel could see it in their eyes. But they stayed silent. It was easier to let humanity take the blame than to admit their own failures. This had been building for years. Humanity had become the Council's problem solvers. When disputes arose, humans mediated. When disasters struck, human ships arrived first with aid. When pirates threatened trade routes, human patrols kept them safe. Quietly, without asking for praise or recognition, humans had become the glue that held the Council together, and they had been resented for it. Vexari finished his speech. "I call for a formal censure of the human delegation. Let it be recorded that their interference has damaged the stability of this Council." The vote was quick. 31 species voted in favor. 12 abstained. Only 4 voted against. Daniel stood. The hall fell silent. Even Vexari paused, curious to see how the human would respond. "High Chancellor," Daniel said. His voice was calm and steady. "Distinguished representatives, I have served this council for 22 years. In that time, I have watched humanity give everything we have to support this institution. We have asked for nothing in return except respect." He paused and looked around the hall. "We have not received it." Whispers spread through the chamber. "Therefore, effective immediately, humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council. All human personnel will depart Council space within 72 hours. Our trade agreements, defense pacts, and humanitarian programs are hereby terminated." The silence lasted only a moment. Then the hall erupted. Some representatives shouted in anger. Others laughed. Vexari smiled widely, his sharp teeth gleaming in the crystal light. "Finally," he said, "the children have decided to go home." Daniel did not respond. He simply gathered his documents and turned to leave. Amy followed him, her face tight with controlled fury. "Sir, we can't just leave. Do they have any idea what will happen without us?" "No," Daniel said. "They don't, and that's the problem. They walked through the corridors of Axiom Prime. Human staff members were already receiving the news on their communicators. Some looked shocked. Others looked relieved. 22 years of thankless work had worn them all down. Outside the station, human ships were powering up their engines. The carrier Resolute, the diplomatic vessel Horizon, a dozen patrol ships, and support craft. Within hours, they would all be gone. Daniel stopped at a viewing window. The stars stretched endlessly before him, cold and beautiful. Somewhere out there, Earth waited. Home. Do you think they'll regret this? Amy asked. Daniel thought about all the small things humanity did that no one noticed. The emergency food supplies they maintained on 12 stations. The medical teams they funded on border worlds. The early warning systems they had built to detect pirate activity. The translators they had trained. The infrastructure they had quietly repaired. Yes, he said. They will. Behind them, the great hall of Axiom Prime was celebrating. Representatives cheered and embraced. Vex'ari was accepting congratulations from his allies. After 80 years, the humans were finally leaving. The council would be pure again, free from outside interference. They had no idea what they had lost. Daniel boarded his shuttle and took one last look at the station. He had given 22 years of his life to this place. He had believed in the council's mission. He had believed that different species could work together for the common good. He still believed that. But belief required respect. And respect had to be mutual. Take us home, he told the pilot. The shuttle lifted off and joined the stream of human vessels departing the station. One by one, the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives and vanished into the darkness. In the great hall, the celebration continued late into the night. No one noticed the silence that followed the human departure. No one noticed the empty seats at mediation tables, the abandoned relief stations, the patrol routes that were suddenly unguarded. They would notice soon enough. Hi. Chancellor Vex'ari raised a glass to his fellow representatives. To a new era, he declared. An era without human interference. An era where we control our own destiny. The hall cheered. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, Daniel Carter sat alone in his cabin and wept. Not for himself, but for all the innocent beings who would suffer because of pride and blindness. He knew what was coming. He had tried to prevent it for 22 years. Now, all he could do was wait for the galaxy to learn its lesson. It would be a painful education. 6 months passed. The galaxy began to fall apart. Trade Minister Kelvin Shore sat in his office on Ritha Prime and stared at the reports on his desk. They made no sense. They could not be real. But they were. 3 major shipping routes had collapsed. Pirates had taken control of the Venex corridor, the most important trade lane in the Eastern Quadrant. Food shipments were not arriving. Medical supplies were stuck in ports, with no one to negotiate their release. The entire economy of the Rithian Consortium was failing. How did this happen? Kelvin asked his assistant. The young Rithian shifted nervously. Minister, the human patrol ships used to guard the Venex corridor. When they left, the pirates moved in within 2 weeks. Kelvin remembered the celebration 6 months ago. He remembered laughing when the humans announced their departure. Good riddance, he had thought. We don't need them. Now his people were starving. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out. The Vel Collective and the Rithian Consortium had returned to their dispute over border territories. Without human mediators, the arguments had grown heated. Then they had grown violent. The first shots were fired 3 months after humanity left. Now both sides were in open war. Admiral Zethkara stood on the bridge of his warship and watched the battle unfold. He was a Torvani officer, loyal to High Chancellor Vex'ari, but even he could see that this war was madness. Admiral, the Vel fleet is advancing on our left flank, his tactical officer reported. Move the 3rd Squadron to intercept, Zethkara ordered. This was supposed to be a simple border dispute. The Torvani had offered to mediate, just as the humans once had. But the Rithians and Vel did not trust the Torvani. They did not trust anyone. Every species on the council had its own interests, its own history of conflicts with others. The humans had been different. They were newcomers with no old grudges. They had no territorial claims against anyone. When they mediated, both sides believed they were being fair. Now there was no one left that anyone trusted. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 12,000 soldiers were dead. Neither side had gained anything. On Earth, Dr. Linda Pearson watched the news feeds from her apartment in Seattle. She was a xenobiologist who had spent 15 years working on council medical projects. She had helped develop vaccines for 6 different species. She had trained hundreds of alien doctors. When humanity withdrew from the council, she had returned home like everyone else. Now she watched the galaxy burn. A plague has broken out on the colony world of Vethys, the news anchor reported. Officials estimate over 2 million infected. The disease appears to be a mutation of the Kelleran virus, which was thought to be eradicated. Linda closed her eyes. She knew exactly what had happened. The Kelleran virus had been controlled by a monitoring system that humans had designed and maintained. When they left, no one had taken over the system. The virus had mutated undetected until it was too late. She had warned them. She had told the council that their medical infrastructure depended on human support. They had not listened. Her communicator buzzed. It was a message from the Vethys government, begging for help. Similar messages had been arriving for weeks from across the galaxy. Earth's government had declined them all. Linda understood why. Humanity had given everything to the council for 80 years. They had been repaid with insults and blame. Why should they help now? But understanding did not make it easier to watch millions die. High Chancellor Veshari addressed the council in the Great Hall of Axiom Prime. The celebration from 6 months ago seemed like ancient history now. The hall was half empty. Many representatives had returned to their home worlds to deal with their own crises. The current difficulties are temporary, Vexari declared. We are simply adjusting to a new reality. The council is stronger without human interference. No one cheered. No one even responded. They all knew he was lying. After the session, Vexari met privately with his advisors. We need to contact the humans, one of them said. Ask them to return. Never, Vexari snapped. I will not beg those primitives for help. Chancellor, our border conflicts are spreading. The Rithian-Vel War has drawn in the Kelthani Federation. 3 more species are threatening to join. If this continues, it will become a galactic war. Vexari waved his 4 arms dismissively. We handled our affairs for millennia before the humans arrived. We will handle them now. But they could not. The truth was simple and painful. Humanity had quietly become essential. They had filled roles that no one else wanted. They had done the boring, thankless work of keeping civilization running. And no one had noticed until they were gone. The trade algorithms that managed shipping routes? Designed by humans. The early warning systems that detected pirate activity? Built by humans. The neutral meeting spaces where enemies could negotiate? Funded by humans. The emergency food reserves? Human. The medical response teams? Human. The diplomatic protocols that allowed different species to communicate without misunderstanding? Human. All of it was falling apart. On the border world of Kethis IV, a young mother named Miravel held her children close as explosions shook their city. The war had reached their planet 3 days ago. Her husband was dead. Her home was destroyed. She had nowhere to go. Where can we run? Her oldest child asked. Miravel thought about the stories she had heard. There was one place in the galaxy that was still peaceful. One place where the fighting had not reached. Human space, she said. We go toward the humans. She did not know if they would accept her. She did not know if she could even reach their borders. But she had no other choice. Across the galaxy, millions of others were making the same decision. Refugees fled from war zones, from plague worlds, from systems where the economy had collapsed. They all headed in the same direction, toward Earth. The humans had left. But the universe was coming to find them anyway. In Seattle, Linda Pearson watched the refugee numbers climb on her screen. Her communicator buzzed again. Another plea for help. Another world dying. She thought about the oath she had taken as a doctor. First, do no harm. But what about when doing nothing was itself a form of harm? She sent a message to the Earth government, offering her services if they decided to help. Then she waited and watched the galaxy tear itself apart. 2 years after humanity left the Council, Commander Nathan Price stood on the bridge of his patrol ship and watched the sensor display with growing horror. "How many ships?" he asked. 47, sir, his sensor officer replied. "Most of them are civilian transports. They're packed full of life signs. I'm reading over 8,000 individuals." Nathan was 35 years old, a career Navy man who had spent the last decade patrolling the borders of human space. He had seen refugee ships before. Small groups, families fleeing one crisis or another. But nothing like this. "They're hailing us, Commander," his communications officer said. "It's a distress call. They say they have wounded aboard. They're running out of food and water. They're begging us to let them dock." Nathan looked at the ships on his screen. They were old vessels, held together with patches and prayers. Some of them were leaking atmosphere. They had traveled for weeks, maybe months, to reach human space. "Sir, our orders are to turn away unauthorized vessels," his first officer reminded him. "Earth has not opened its borders to refugees." Nathan knew the orders. He also knew what was happening in the galaxy beyond human space. 7 wars were now burning across former Council territory. The Rithian-Vel conflict had spread like wildfire, drawing in species after species. Billions had died in the fighting. Billions more had died from famine and plague. The Galactic Council had officially dissolved 6 months ago. There was no government left, no authority, no organization. Just chaos and death. And now 8,000 survivors had come to his doorstep, begging for help. "Open a channel to the lead ship," Nathan said. "Sir?" "Just do it." A moment later, a face appeared on the main screen. It was a Zelani female, exhausted and thin. Nathan recognized the species from his training. They were a peaceful people, traders and artists. They had never been involved in any of the wars. "Human vessel, please," she said. Her voice was hoarse. "We have children aboard. They are dying. I am Miravel, and I speak for all these ships. We ask only for food and medicine. Then we will go wherever you tell us." Nathan looked at her face. He saw the desperation there, the fear, the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, the humans would be different. "Miravel," he said, "I'm Commander Nathan Price. I'm opening our docking bays. Bring your ships in. We'll take care of your people." His first officer started to protest, but Nathan held up his hand. "I'll take responsibility. Get medical teams to the docking bay. Now." Over the next 6 hours, Nathan's crew worked without rest. They guided the refugee ships into the bay. They carried the wounded to the medical center. They handed out food and water to people who had not eaten in days. Nathan walked through the docking bay and saw things that would stay with him forever. Children so thin their bones showed through their skin. Parents who had given their own food to keep their families alive. Elderly individuals who had died during the journey, their bodies wrapped in cloth and carried by grieving relatives. Miravel found him near one of the medical tents. "Commander Price," she said, "I do not have words to thank you. We were told humans had closed their borders. We thought we would die in space." "Not on my watch," Nathan said. "What happened to your world?" Miravel's eyes filled with tears. "The war came to us. We were neutral. We took no sides, but the fighting spread anyway. Our cities were bombed. Our ships were attacked. We fled with nothing." Nathan had heard similar stories from other refugees. The wars respected no boundaries. Neutral species, peaceful worlds, isolated colonies. None of them were safe anymore. "Where will you go now?" he asked, We do not know. No one will take us. The other species are fighting among themselves. Human space is the only peaceful place left in the galaxy. Nathan thought about Earth, about his home. The government was debating what to do about the refugee crisis. Some wanted to help. Others said it was not humanity's problem anymore. The council had rejected them. Why should they care what happened now? He understood the anger. But looking at Maravel and her people, he could not feel it. On Earth, Secretary General Patricia Lane addressed the Global Assembly. She was a tall woman in her 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had been elected 2 years ago, just before humanity left the council. The situation is clear, she said. The former council space is collapsing. Wars, famines, plagues. Over 200 billion beings have died in the past 2 years. Millions of refugees are heading toward our borders. We must decide how to respond. The assembly erupted in argument. Some demanded that Earth seal its borders completely. Others called for immediate humanitarian intervention. The debate went on for hours. Finally, Patricia raised her hand for silence. I have listened to all of you, she said. I understand the anger. The council treated us badly. They blamed us for their problems. They celebrated when we left. But I ask you to remember who we are. She paused and looked around the chamber. We are humans. We do not abandon people in need because our feelings were hurt. We do not let children starve because their governments insulted us. That is not who we are. It has never been who we are. The chamber was silent. We will help those in need, Patricia continued. We will accept refugees. We will provide aid to the suffering. But we will not return to the council. We will not lead those who scorned us. We will help because it is right, not because anyone asked us to. The vote was close, but it passed. Earth opened its borders to refugees. Humanitarian ships began loading supplies for distribution. Medical teams prepared to deploy to plague-stricken worlds. On the patrol ship, Nathan received the news. He shared it with Miravel, who wept with relief. Your people are kind, she said. Nathan shook his head. We're not saints. We're just trying to do the right thing. He looked out at the stars, thinking about all the suffering happening out there. Humanity had not caused it. They had not wanted it. But they could not ignore it either. That was the burden of being human. The galaxy had rejected them, and still they could not turn away from those who needed help. It was a strength, Nathan realized. Maybe the greatest strength of all. 3 years after humanity left the council, the galaxy lay in ruins. The wars had finally burned themselves out. Not because anyone had won, but because there was nothing left to fight over. Worlds that had been great centers of civilization were now graveyards. Species that had numbered in the billions now counted their survivors in the millions. On Earth, refugee camps had grown into small cities. 20 million beings from dozens of species now lived under human protection. They were fed, housed, and cared for. Many of them had lost everything except their lives. Ambassador Daniel Carter had retired to a small cabin in Montana. He spent his days fishing and reading, trying not to think about the galaxy he had left behind. But the galaxy would not leave him alone. Sir, there's a delegation waiting for you. Daniel looked up from his book. A young aide from the government stood at his door, looking nervous. A delegation? From the former council species. 12 representatives. They've come to Earth to ask for help. Secretary General Lane thought you should meet with them first. Daniel sighed. He was 61 years old now. He had hoped to spend his remaining years in peace. But duty had always been his weakness. Who sent them? The aide checked her tablet. The Rithian Consortium, the Vel Collective, the Kelthani Federation, and 9 other major species. They're calling themselves the Galactic Remnant. Daniel recognized all those names. They had all voted to censure humanity 3 years ago. They had all celebrated when humans left. And what do they want? They want humanity to help rebuild. They want us to return. Daniel laughed bitterly. Of course they do. But he went to the meeting anyway. It was held in a government building in New Geneva, the capital of Earth's unified government. Daniel entered the conference room and stopped short. He recognized most of the representatives. Trade ministers, military officers, diplomats he had worked with for decades. But one face stood out among the others. High Chancellor Vexari, or rather, the former High Chancellor. The Tovani leader who had blamed humanity for everything. The one who had called them children and primitives. He sat at the table in simple clothes, his forearms folded, his eyes downcast. He had lost weight. His dark blue skin had faded to a grayish tone. He looked broken. Ambassador Carter, one of the Rithian representatives, said, "Thank you for meeting with us." Daniel sat down across from them. "I'm retired. I'm not sure why Secretary General Lane asked me to come." "Because you know us," the Rithian said. "You know what we did wrong. And we hope you might understand why we're here." Daniel looked at Vexari. "Does the High Chancellor have anything to say?" Vexari looked up. His eyes, once proud and fierce, were now filled with shame. "I am no longer High Chancellor," he said quietly. "My people removed me from power 2 years ago. When our cities fell, they remembered my speeches about human interference. They remembered how I celebrated your departure. They blamed me for what followed. And were they right to blame you?" Vexari was silent for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said. "They were right. I was a fool. I did not see what you were doing for us. I did not understand how much we depended on your work. I thought we were strong enough alone." He shook his head slowly. "We were not." Daniel felt no satisfaction hearing this. He had known it would happen. He had tried to warn them. Being proven right was no comfort when billions had died. "Why are you here, Vexari?" "I have come to beg," the former chancellor said. "Not for myself. I deserve nothing. But for the children who did not vote to send you away. For the innocent who had no voice in our foolishness. They are still dying, Ambassador. Every day, more of them die. And only humanity can save them." Daniel sat back and thought. He thought about the 22 years he had given to the council. He thought about the insults and the blame. He thought about the night he had wept in his cabin as his ship carried him away from Axiom Prime. "I don't know if humanity wants to save you," he said honestly. "We were hurt, badly." "We know," the Rithian representative said. "We are not here to make demands. We are not even here to apologize, because no apology could ever be enough. We are simply here to ask, please, help us." The meeting ended without resolution. Daniel returned to Montana to think. 2 days later, he received a message that changed everything. It was a letter, written by a young Tovani named Kethvos. He was 12 years old, an orphan living in one of Earth's refugee camps. His parents had died when the wars reached their colony. He had been rescued by human aid workers and brought to safety. "Dear Secretary General Lane," the letter read, "My name is Kethvos. I am from Torvin. I know your people are angry at my people. My people hurt you. They said bad things about you. But the humans who saved me were not angry. They gave me food when I was hungry. They gave me medicine when I was sick. They gave me a home when I had nothing. You saved me when my own people could not. Please save the rest. Not for the leaders who were cruel, but for the children like me who just want to live. Thank you. Kethvos." The letter went viral across human media. Within hours, millions of people had read it. The image of a 12-year-old orphan asking humanity to save his people touched something deep in the human heart. Daniel read the letter in his cabin. He read it twice. Then he put down his fishing rod and made a call. "Patricia," he said when the Secretary General answered, "I think we need to talk." He met with her the next day in New Geneva. She looked tired. The refugee crisis had aged her visibly. "I know what you're going to say," she said. "We should help them. Yes. They hurt us, Daniel. They threw us out like garbage. I know. But we've never been a species that lets others suffer because our feelings were hurt. That's not who we are. Patricia looked at the letter from Kethvos on her desk. A child's words, simple and honest. No, she said quietly. It's not. She looked up at Daniel. Will you help? Come out of retirement. Daniel thought about his cabin, his fishing rod, his peaceful days. Then he thought about the children in refugee camps, the orphans on dying worlds, the innocent beings who had done nothing wrong except be born into a galaxy that had lost its way. Yes, he said. I'll help. The humanitarian fleet departed Earth on a clear spring morning. 3 years and 6 months after humanity had left the Galactic Council, Admiral Christina Webb stood on the bridge of the carrier Mercy and watched the ships form up around her. There were over 200 vessels in the fleet. Hospital ships, supply transports, engineering vessels, diplomatic shuttles. The largest humanitarian mission in human history. All ships report ready, Admiral. Her first officer said Christina was 50 years old, a career officer who had spent most of her life in space. She had commanded warships during the border skirmishes of her youth. She had led patrol squadrons during the pirate wars. But this was different. This fleet carried no weapons. Its only cargo was hope. Send a message to all ships, she said. Tell them what we're about to do matters more than anything we've ever done before. We're not going to fight anyone. We're going to save them. The fleet jumped too, faster than light speed, and began its journey into the ruins of former Council space. What they found was worse than the Council space. Reports had described worlds that had once held billions were now empty. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were rubble. The survivors lived in camps, in caves, in the wreckage of their former lives. They had no food, no medicine, no hope. Until the human ships appeared in their skies. Dr. Marcus Flynn led the medical teams on the planet Vethos. He was a tall man with kind eyes and steady hands. He had worked in disaster zones before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The plague is still active, his assistant reported. We're estimating 8 million infected across this continent alone. Marcus looked at his supplies. He had enough vaccines for maybe half of them, but half was better than none. Set up treatment centers in every major population area, he ordered. Prioritize children and the elderly. Train local doctors to administer the vaccines. We need to multiply our reach as quickly as possible. Over the next weeks, his teams worked around the clock. They saved millions of lives. And when they ran out of vaccines, they called Earth for more. The shipments arrived within days. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Human engineers rebuilt power systems that had failed years ago. Human diplomats negotiated ceasefires between factions that had been fighting for generations. Human teachers opened schools for children who had never learned to read. It was not charity. It was not conquest. It was simply humans doing what they had always done, helping those in need because they could not bear to do otherwise. The former Council species watched in amazement. Why are you doing this? A Val official asked Admiral Webb. We voted against you. We blamed you for our problems. We celebrated when you left. Christina looked at him with calm eyes. Because it needed to be done. But we don't deserve your help. Maybe not. But the children in your refugee camps didn't vote against us. The sick in your hospitals didn't celebrate our departure. They're innocent. And we don't punish the innocent for the mistakes of their leaders. The official was silent for a long moment. I don't understand you humans, he finally said. Christina smiled slightly. Most species don't. 6 months after the humanitarian fleet arrived, the former Council species gathered on Axiom Prime. The Great Hall had been damaged in the wars, but human engineers had helped repair it. Now representatives from all the surviving species filled the chamber once more. Secretary General Patricia Lane addressed them. Thank you for inviting me to speak, she said. When humanity left this council 3 years ago, we were angry. We felt unappreciated and disrespected. We still feel that way. The chamber was completely silent. But anger is not enough reason to let people suffer. Hurt feelings are not enough reason to let children starve. We came back not because you deserved our help, but because we could not live with ourselves if we didn't give it. She paused and looked around the hall. You have asked us to lead a new council. You have offered us permanent positions of authority. We decline. Murmurs spread through the chamber. We do not want to rule you, Patricia continued. We never wanted to rule you. We just wanted to live alongside you, as equals, treated with respect. That is still all we want. She stepped back from the podium. We propose a new galactic assembly. Equal representation for all species. No permanent leaders. No special privileges. Decisions made together, by consensus. If you can agree to that, we will stay. If not, we will continue our humanitarian work and leave you to govern yourselves. The debate lasted for hours. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. The new Galactic Assembly was born. Ambassador Daniel Carter watched the proceedings from a seat near the back of the hall. He had come out of retirement to help coordinate the reconstruction effort, but he had refused any official position. Beside him sat young Kethvos, the orphan whose letter had helped change humanity's heart. He was 13 now, healthy and strong. The humans had adopted him into one of their schools. He was learning to be a diplomat, like the humans who had saved his life. Is this what you wanted? Kethvos asked quietly. Daniel thought about the question. He thought about the 22 years he had served the old council. He thought about the day he had announced humanity's departure. He thought about the millions who had died in the years of chaos. No, he said honestly. I wanted the old council to treat us with respect. I wanted them to see what we were doing for them. I wanted things to be different without all this suffering. Then why did you come back? Daniel looked at the young Torani. In his face, he saw the future. A new generation that might do better than the old one. Because suffering doesn't care about fairness, he said. People were dying. Children like you were losing their families. We can help, so we did. That's the only reason that matters. A Rithian historian named Sevenkai recorded the events for future generations. Years later, his account would become the standard history of this period. The final paragraph read, "The humans returned to save us, not because we deserve salvation, but because that is who they are. They could have let us burn. They had every right to watch from a distance as we destroyed ourselves. But they did not. They came back with food and medicine and hope. They asked for nothing in return except to be treated as equals. We learned too late what the humans knew all along. True strength is not found in dominance. It is found in the quiet hands that hold everything together, asking nothing, expecting nothing, simply doing what must be done because it is right." In the Great Hall of Axiom Prime, the new Galactic Assembly held its first session. Human representatives sat among the others, equals at last. Outside, the stars burned cold and bright. The universe had gone insane without humanity. Now, slowly, it was finding its way back to sanity, and the humans would be there to help. Not because they had to, but because they could not imagine being any other way. That was their gift to the galaxy. That was what it meant to be human.